Here we go, ladies and gentlemen, another edition of the Bird Brains with Ken and Mark. I'm ex-Philadelphia Eagles, Philadelphia Stars tight end Ken Dunnick. My partner is the longtime Eagles beat writer for NJ.com and the Trenton Times, Mark Eckel. Mark is now living the good life in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, but he's pretty busy for a retired guy. He does our podcast, does a Packers report. How you liking life down there in South Carolina, buddy?
No, it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff I do, it's funny. I met some people over the weekend watching games Sunday afternoon, and they're like, "Oh, so you do?" I'm like, "No, this is what I do now is fun. Like what I used to do was work. I mean, working every day and writing
you guys were
stories a day,
going to press conferences,
and practice, and,
pissing people off in the Eagles front office, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was work. This is, I could always say no now.
That's true.
If something comes up, hey Ken, I can't do it. I've said no. Hey Mark, can you tape Monday at this? No, I can't.
Yeah,
all right, how about Tuesday? Okay, that works.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to say. I couldn't say no when it was your job.
Well, the only time you say no to me if I'm breaking into margarita time or something. But anyway, right. Let me mention our sponsor. It's Jersey Man and Philly Man magazine. And by the way, our party of the year is coming up on November 2nd. We honor 6 Man and Women of the Year candidates at our gala. All their charities benefit. It's at Ballroom at the Ben, again on November 2nd. If you'd like tickets for the event, go to jerseymanmagazine.com and you can buy them there. And Mark, I got to tell you, Coach Vermeil has given us his wine experience again for the year. Are you a wine guy? Do you drink any red wine at all? Okay. Yes. Well, Coach Vermeil has excellent wine. He's got a winery out in Napa. And he does an experience for us, gives us the wine, comes out with Carol. We have dinner with the group. He samples all of his wines. We raise a bunch of money for charity, and he's given us that auction item again this year. So, yeah, he steadfastly remains one of the greatest.
I've said this to you before, but for a guy that only played for him 1 year, you made a heck of an impression on him because
listen,
I tell him we're pretty good friends.
I tell him all the time, I wish he liked me as much then as he does now.
Would have kept you around a little longer.
I could have got a few more years out of it and maybe a pension. But let's talk about the Eagles' Week 7 victory against the Miami Dolphins. A lot of people were down on the Eagles. We talked about their struggles with the Jets last week. They came back with 31-17. Pretty resounding win against an excellent offense. Their defense was incredible. I got to tell you something. I'm a big fan of Mike McDaniel, this Miami Dolphins coach. He's put together a package. And by the way, this might be the fastest NFL team I've ever seen, led by Tyreek Hill. But, he gets these guys in motion right before the snap, and they have a head start. And you just can't keep up with them. And the fact that the Eagles were able to pen them in, and they really only scored 10 points as an offense because 7 points was a pick 6. So
the fumble the pick 6 was 7, and the Hurts's fumble gave him 3.
Exactly.
So the defense really only allowed 7. Yeah.
It was a great day for the defense. We'll talk about some of the outstanding defensive plays. Darius Slay had a pick at the end of the game that was important because Miami was driving. And he picked it off at the goal line and stopped the drive. Interestingly enough, the guy with the leading amount of tackles in that game, Terrell Edmonds, got traded yesterday. The Eagles traded Terrell Edmonds to the Tennessee Titans. Well, by the way, and for Kelvin Byard, by the way, I believe that's the way you pronounce his name. Why would Tennessee want to continue to trade with the Eagles after what they did to them with A.J. Brown? I mean, seriously, right?
But I thought, people thinking the Eagles fleeced the Titans on this deal. It's a good deal for the Eagles because the Eagles are in win now mode.
Mm-hmm.
So they acquire a 30-year-old safety. Now, let's be honest.
2-time Pro Bowler, hasn't been a Pro Bowler since 2021.
He's a good player, no doubt about it. The Eagles got a good player that's going to help them in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles are trying to win a Super Bowl in 2023. Tennessee with or without him is not winning the Super Bowl in 2023. They're not even winning their division with or without him.
Mm-hmm.
So Tennessee gets a 26-year-old safety and 2 draft picks for a 30-year-old safety.
Definitely
not
building
a bad,
for the future.
If you're looking at it from the Titans standpoint, not a bad move. Plus, I believe he's a free agent next year. So Tennessee was probably going to lose him. He was probably going to leave Tennessee to go to a contender or more of a contender, more of a win now team at 31. He doesn't want to be on a rebuilding team. So
Yeah.
Tennessee got something. They got a 26-year-old safety, still in his prime in Edmonds, and 2 draft picks. So it's not a terrible trade on Tennessee's part. But from the Eagles' standpoint, yes, they got a guy that they upgraded the safety position with a guy that can help them right now.
And that's important because it's an area of weakness. Of course, Reed Blankenship did not play this week. I don't think it's a long-term type of a thing. And Brown has been injured.
It tells me that Reed Blankenship might be longer term than we're led to believe that they may, because I'm
Well,
saying never.
it's an oblique, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
those are tricky.
Oh, you don't know. Some guys, it could be minor and he's back in 2 weeks, or it could be 6 weeks.
Yeah.
You just don't know. Everybody's different.
A lot of people don't know this. I used to have oblique. I used to have abs. I can't see them anymore because I'm putting a little bit of weight. But hopefully my oblique is okay. How about mention some of the other defensive standouts? Hassan Reddick, what a motor. I mean, we say this every week. He was credited with no sacks, but he really was responsible for 2 plays that were stopped at the line of scrimmage. I thought Zach Cunningham maybe played his best game of the year last week. Very active. It's funny, the perspective you get in watching the game. I was in a suite, not that I'm name dropping or anything, but I was in a suite for the game.
Of course you were.
And you could, and this is a great vantage point, and you can see the entire field, and you can really see some of the linebacker and defensive backfield play that you really can't see on TV. It's an interesting perspective for me. And Zach Cunningham is a really athletic linebacker. I mean, he moves around, he makes plays. I haven't been high on the Eagles linebackers for a long time, but I thought he played pretty well. Jordan Davis is a stalwart on that defensive line. I don't know how you run at Jordan Davis because he's going to stuff it almost every time. He's a huge human being. Jalen Carter actually got in the game this week. He only had 1 tackle, limited performance, but it's good to see him back getting his feet wet. So any thoughts defensively on what you saw from the Eagles?
I just like seeing Cunningham and Kelly Green again.
Right, there you go. I never even thought of that.
That was my thought. Yeah.
It shows you how old I am. I predate Kelly Green, so that's a little scary.
Oh, you wore Kelly Green?
No, we didn't wear Kelly. We wore the darker green. Yeah, Kelly Green was Buddy Ryan.
Right. Okay. You were. You are old. I forgot.
All right,
if I didn't cover you, if you played before, because I'm old, if I didn't cover you, you must be old.
I know. And I also look a lot older on this TV screen than you do, by the way. Joe, we got to do something about that. We got to get a filter in here. Anyway,
only because for some reason, I haven't gone gray. I don't know why.
I
don't dye it. Believe me, I will. I don't care enough that I would dye it.
Hey, listen, the fact that I still have hair after raising 4 daughters through high school and college. Believe me, I'm okay with being a little white on the head. Let's talk about offensively. Jalen Hurts, another solid performance. Although he's feeling some pressure, and he's making a couple of bad decisions. I don't know if it's the Opeta in there for Juergens thing, but I do know that he's much more pressured than he was last year. Now, of course, last week was because Lane Johnson left the game, but
Lane played, but he wasn't himself.
Well, I didn't pay enough attention to that, but I will say this: Hurts under pressure is throwing a lot of throws off of his back foot. Now, he's athletic enough to get away with that, but normally that's a no-no because the ball will flutter and fly and not go on a trajectory. His arm strength has improved. He's throwing bullets off of both feet, but it was just a notice that I took during the game that he is feeling more pressure. He had decent numbers, 23 for 31, 279 yards. He was sacked 3 times. And he did have 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, which really wasn't his fault because it was a deflected ball. And he had a fumble, and he's got to improve his ball security. But your thoughts on Hurts?
I'm a big Hurts guy. I've always been. I'm the one guy that liked the pick when they made it. I thought it was a good move. I liked him at Alabama. I liked him at Oklahoma. And like you said, he's gotten better. He's the kind of from what, again, I'm not there like I was every day, but just knowing about him and talking to people about, he outworks everybody.
Yeah,
That the old cliche, he's the first one in the building, the last
he
one in the.
is.
He
Everything I
is. He
hear, he
really
is.
is. He's there
Yeah.
before Sirianni some days. But that tells me a lot about the kid. He's easy to root for. He's probably one of the. I mean, even if you're not an Eagles fan, if you're just a fan of football, he's a guy. And I know this. I mean, from being down here, there's not a lot of Eagle fans down in South Carolina. There's all kind of fans because people move from everywhere. But he seems to be well liked. I've never heard anybody down here say like, "Yeah, I don't like Jalen Hurts." No, it's
Mm.
like, "Hey, Jalen Hurts, that's the kind of guy I like to root." Because he's a good kid. He seems like a real good kid, and he works. He works hard. He's not a guy that rests back and just lets his talent
Now,
speak.
he's not this kind of a guy, but do you think there was a little bit of a revenge factor there? Hurts against Tua. Tua's the guy
A
who
little
took
bit.
his job at
A little bit.
Alabama. Do you think
Yeah,
he wanted to
sure it
beat him?
was.
Yeah.
Well, oh
Uh,
yeah, he won't say that. He won't say
mhm.
that publicly because he's not that kind. Like we said, he's not that kind of guy. But sure, you want to beat him. You want to beat the guy that took your job. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's a little
Not only did he
rivalry there.
take his job, he chased him out of the school. Hurts finished his career at Oklahoma. So,
But I
uh,
tell you what, that's another thing. Hurts learned from, in my opinion, maybe the two best coaches in college football. He had Nick Saban for whatever many years, and he had Lincoln Riley.
Lincoln Riley, yeah,
Lincoln Riley's a
who
great
is an
quarterback.
offensive genius, by the way.
Yes,
He
the
can't.
best
He doesn't know
quarterback.
how to coach defense. Obviously, if you look
No,
at
no, no.
USC.
But if your son's a great quarterback, send him to Lincoln Riley because
Yeah.
he's done more. I mean, he's had what, 3 Heisman Trophy winners already, right? Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, and Kyler Murray.
Yes, that's true. Huh.
It's pretty impressive.
How about? I really thought the Eagles would
That's a
have
good.
an
It was a
emphasis.
great win. Great
Yeah,
win. Let's just say
absolutely.
that. Miami's a
Um,
good team.
I thought the Eagles would really come out and make an effort to try to run the ball more, and they did early. DeAndre Swift had a solid game, 15 carries for 62 yards. He had I don't know if you noticed the play in the second half when he planted his foot and made a Barry Sanders type cut and left the linebacker in the breeze and gained another 8 to 10 yards. But the Eagles did okay on the ground. They rushed for 99 yards. Hurts was responsible for 21. Gainwell had 16 with a nice touchdown run. Um,
Memphis.
and we can go ahead and comment on the rushing game, but I do want to talk about AJ Brown as soon as you're done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, Miami's a good team. This wasn't. This is a team that came in 5-1 with some impressive performances.
Yep.
So, they. I didn't think listen. I wouldn't have laid 13 points in this game. I would not. If you told me they were going to win by 14, I'd have given you a strange look. And it was closer. It was 24-17 at one. It was tied at one point, right? So I mean, it was a good game. But the Eagles,
It was
they showed their
it was
pop
17-17 the second
at
half.
one point,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So this was coming off that awful loss to the Jets, and there's no other way to say it. That was just an awful performance. And it happens in the course of an 18-week season, with the bye, you're going to have one of those. And
Mm-hmm.
the Eagles had one last year against Washington at home. I mean, they lost to an inferior team. And they did again this year. It happens. It happens to every. San Francisco lost to Minnesota last night. I don't think Minnesota's better than San Francisco, but they lost to them. And on the road, it happens.
Of
But for them
course.
to bounce back the way they did, to me was very impressive. And I saw a stat where now Hurts has never lost back-to-back games.
Hmm.
So that again tells me something about him, that he's not going to. And you knew after the way his performance against the Jets, which listen, was he didn't play well either. You knew he was going to come out with a good game.
Yeah, let's talk about the receivers too. AJ Brown, who's I believe I set an Eagles record with his sixth consecutive game over 100 yards receiving. He had 10 catches for 137 yards and a touchdown. Our podcast we recorded on Monday last week, and we missed the breaking news that the Eagles signed Julio Jones, who's actually on the field, made a reception for 3 yards. I think that has more to do with Quez Watkins probably not going to come back as quickly as they had hoped. What are your thoughts on the Eagles receiving core and the addition of Jones?
I guess, I mean,
Depends on what
I
he's
love,
got left, right?
yeah, I don't know what he has left, but I mean, you know how I feel about AJ Brown. Like I've said it since last year, that's the best trade in Eagle history. I
Mhm.
mean, it put him in, and I hate saying that because Bill Berge, I like Bill Brown. Bill's a friend, and I used to say that was the best trade in Eagle history. But no, AJ Brown, I mean, he doesn't get the recognition, I don't think, of Hill, Tyreek Hill, and Justin Jefferson, and all those guys. But he's right, to me. He's right there with him. His toughness, more than anything else, too, which is what I love about him.
Now, talking about Julio
Tight end.
Jones. Sorry, Mark, you're freezing there a little
Oh,
bit,
Jones.
but
I mean, he's not the guy he was.
mhm.
He's not what he was, obviously, right? But I mean, it's not a bad idea to bring in a guy that's been there. A guy that's been in big games, played a long time.
Well, listen, they don't
He's
they
not going to
don't
hurt
do
him.
they don't do it off of press clippings. They work these guys out. I mean, it's not like, oh, Julio Jones available, let's go sign him. They bring him in, they work him out, they see if they can still run, they go through a physical, they see if he's still healthy, and they decide on whether or not to bring a guy in. And obviously, that's what they did with Jones. So hopefully, he'll be a good addition.
I mean, we're expecting the guy that was with Hopkins when they were, with Matt Ryan. He's not that anymore. But you're not asking him to be number one because you have AJ Brown and you have Devontae Smith. You're asking him to be a 3.
Mhm.
At this point, yeah, he could probably be a very good 3.
I want to talk about a play that I think Vince Lombardi was rolling in his grave when he saw this, and that's Nick Sirianni up 24-17 with 10 minutes left in the game, 4th and 1 on his own 26, and he goes for it because the tush push is unstoppable with Jalen Hurts. What'd you think about that call?
I loved it. I really did. I mean, I was surprised. I'm watching the game, and the punter went out, and I said,
Yeah, they
okay. I
changed
mean,
their mind.
that's the right move. The right move. Like you said, most, if not all, coaches would punt at that time, right? But I was surprised because I know I've watched enough Nick Sirianni and I've watched enough of the tush push or the brotherly or whatever you want to call it, that I was a little surprised they're not gonna go for it here. And then he calls timeout. I'm like, okay, something's
Mark,
up.
they're on their own 26.
I know where they were.
They are up by 7.
Oh, if
No,
that failed, he's
listen,
getting
oh
killed.
yeah. Doug Peterson started all this stuff, all this going forward, in
Yeah.
certain situations. Do you think they have analytics guys in their ears saying you got a certain percent chance of doing this versus this? I
I
mean,
hope not.
yeah.
I hope not. Because I'm not an analytics guy. I'm a gut guy. And I think I mean, when you have that play, that's what I saw the number, what is it, 90 some percent that's successful. And when you have a play like that, and it's only a yard, or maybe it was less than a yard, I think you do good. They did it again, right? It was 4th and 1 again.
They did it on the same drive. On the
Yeah.
same drive, yeah. And
I
it's got to
mean,
be frustrating because teams are prepping for this. I mean, they're doing everything they can to
and
stop.
they still
Do you
can't
remember
stop
the last time it was stopped? I think it was early last year. I seem to recall,
it.
and it might have even been a penalty or a false start or something.
I think I believe it was.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't think it was actually stopped by the defense. It was stopped by like you said, a penalty. And then if you get stopped by a penalty, then obviously you punt.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 4th and 6 now, and you punt. But it's a hell of a play, and
It's an incredible weapon to be able
I
to
love
do that.
Sirianni's quote about
Oh
it.
yeah,
About
after the game, yeah,
he says it's 1st and 9 for us.
yeah,
We only need to get 9.
and also teams don't do it as well as we do. Otherwise, they wouldn't be
Right.
crying about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, it helps
Of
that
course.
they have a very good offensive line and a very, very, very good center, and that Hurts is so strong that you could have a great line. Like, all right, let's put it this way: if Hurts was out of the game and Mariota was in, he's a backup still, right? He's still number 2.
Yes.
Mariota. I don't know if they run that play.
Oh, there's no way.
Right?
The reason why that play is successful is the Jalen Hurts squats about 900 pounds.
Exactly.
I mean, and then he gets a good shove from the back, and thus the
I mean,
name of the
everybody,
team.
listen, people have run the quarterback sneak forever.
Yeah.
Forever. Bart Starr in the Ice Bowl.
Well, that was a quarterback sneak without help.
Right. This
Yeah, they
right.
were on their own. This is a convoy behind them, and
Yeah,
between
this is a
Hurts's
totally different,
leg
you know,
strength and the
and,
help from behind.
and it's not a sneak. You can't call it a sneak because the whole world knows it's coming.
You're
They're
right.
not sneaking anybody. The whole everybody, the defense
Rename
knows
it
what
the
they're going to do.
quarterback obvious, not the quarterback sneak.
Right.
All right, now Mark, I
Um,
know you and I like to put a couple shekels on the games every once in a while. I see the quintessential trap game coming up for the Eagles because they're coming off a big win. They're at Washington, a team that always gives them trouble, and they follow up that with the Dallas game, which is always a point of emphasis. Do you think the Eagles might be in danger here?
no.
No.
I mean, it could be. It's going to be a good game because, like
I
you
know
said,
you're not going to lay the points. I haven't seen the spread
I
yet, but
wouldn't give
you're not going to
6.
lay the
I'm
points.
not going to lay 6, but I'm not going to take the 6 either.
Okay.
I'll just sit back and watch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they'll lose because they lost to Washington last year, and because Washington probably should have beaten them this year or could have beaten them this year if Riverboat Ron, gambler, would have gambled.
If Riverboat Ron had any of these that the Phillies are doing,
Yeah, right. And then his answer to the question was even worse. We were gassed.
Yeah, yeah.
Those,
You're gassed? That's even more reason to go for one play.
Go for it, right? End the game, right? But anyway, I think they're not. The Eagles are certainly not going to look past Washington because they lost to them last year. Washington gave them all they could handle this year. So no, they won't. The Eagles will be ready. And the biggest mismatch when you look at that game is the Eagles' defensive line against Washington's offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised they didn't do a better job. I watched that Giants Washington game a little bit last week.
That was awful.
It was, but the Giants defense, which isn't that great, dominated Washington's offense.
Did you watch you talk about the game last week, the Giants Washington game last week? Yeah. That might have been one of the worst football games I've ever seen.
It was the only game I had.
Luckily, I was at a tailgate and I couldn't see much of it, but what I saw was pretty ugly.
I ended up going out to watch other games because I didn't want to. I had enough of that one.
So, and as you look in the Eagles' schedule, now we were a little bit pessimistic last week coming off of that poor performance against the Jets, and we saw Miami coming into town. Prolific offense. The Washington thing scares me a little bit. You got Dallas. Then luckily they have the bye, but then they're at Kansas City, which luckily again they're coming off the bye, so they'll be rested and ready for that. Buffalo doesn't look as ominous as they did after losing to New England this week. They're still a very good team, and I really do believe that eventually they're going to get it together and vie for that division. San Francisco loses last night to Minnesota.
Yeah.
NFL, even great NFL teams are going to lose 2 to 4 games a year. That's just the way it works. There's injuries. It's human nature. It's a motivation. There's a lot of things that go into wins and losses in NFL teams. But just looking at the schedule, and again, and following that, you got at Dallas, at Seattle. These are all tough games. But I don't think the schedule, if teams play the way they have been recently, is as ominous as we first thought.
No, it's well, like again, week to week, you don't know. There's a fine line. There really is a fine line between the best teams and the worst teams. I go back to the year the Eagles went to the year
any given Sunday, right?
Yeah, or Monday or Thursday or whenever they play. But the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they were the best team in the league, right? They won the Super Bowl. They played the Giants twice that year, obviously, like they always do. The Giants were probably they were the worst team in the NFC that year. Mm-hmm. I don't think they were the worst team. They had the second pick of the draft, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's when they got Barkley. Mm-hmm. So they were the second worst team in football, the worst team in the NFC. Eagles played them twice, beat them on a 61-yard field, the longest field goal in team history. It took to beat them the one time. And the other time, I believe the Giants led most of the game. The Eagles had to come back to win. Mm-hmm. So there you have it. I mean, and you know better than I. People ask me this all the time. Why is that team so bad? I'm like, or just pointing at a team, whatever, like Carolina this year. A lot of people down here are like wondering what happened, why the Panthers
Mhm.
are. It's a lot goes into it. Sometimes it's I hate to say it, sometimes it's coaching.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have, because every player in the NFL is a good player. People say, "Oh, he stinks." No, he stinks compared to
Nobody
somebody
stinks.
else.
If they're getting
Nobody
paid
if you're in the
720
NFL,
minimum salary, nobody stinks. I promise you.
right, exactly.
Some aren't
They're
as
all
good
good
as
players,
others, but nobody
right?
stinks. There's a reason why
And
they have the job.
some of it, that's what I'm saying. Some of it is based on the position. I hate to use Andy Reid's old quote, but the coaches have to put the players in the
Mhm.
position to make plays,
Oh,
and the team.
I thought you were going to say time's yours.
That too. uh, but you know that goes a lot of that goes schemes and you've seen it. You've seen where a guy plays for one team and he's like just okay, maybe not even just, and then he gets traded and he goes somewhere else and all of a sudden he's a star. Well, what happened? He's the same guy. Well, that scheme fits him better.
Sure.
Or if he's a receiver, he's playing with a better quarterback now, or whatever.
It's the
So,
same with
so
matchups. Some
yeah,
teams' strengths play into other teams' weaknesses, and vice versa. And just because the records might be disparate doesn't mean that it's a mismatch. But anyway, Mark, half an hour is gone. The time always goes quickly. It's fun talking Eagles football with you. Hopefully, we'll be on next week talking about an Eagles win against Washington. For my partner, Mark Eckel, I'm Ken Dunnick. Thanks for listening to the Bird Brains, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.